This story has no world building. Luke Skywalker takes you out of your house and shoots you if you read Albert Camus and the United States was devastated by some war. It's a world where young men sign up to walk either until they get shot for stopping or they see 49 other guys get shot, but I have no idea why they do it. Well, we all know Stephen King is a horrible person. That's not news to any of us who have had the misfortune of happening across his Twitter account. Luckily for Stephen King, I'm actually quite good at separating the art from the artist. Unluckily for Stephen King, The Long Walk sucks. Now, I understand this is going to be an unpopular opinion. I understand most people actually liked this movie. What I can't understand is why. I mean, this barely counts as a story. It's being held up by half a pillar of storytelling at best. You know what? I'll do my best to postpone my incredulity until after a little spoiler free plot summary. But warning, I'm going to talk spoilers later. This restraint is just for the next 30 seconds or so. Because luckily, this movie is supremely easy to explain. It's a dystopian future. The United States is in ruin, economically at least, and there now exists a competition that any young man can enter, where one from each of the 50 states is selected from a voluntary lottery to take the long walk. The objective is simple: be the last man walking. Everyone must keep a pace of 3 miles per hour. If you fall under that pace, you receive 3 warnings before you're executed by one of the gunmen riding alongside the group in tanks. If you're the last one walking, you get a huge cash prize and the government will grant you one wish. I mean, it's basically impossible to not think about the Hunger Games in describing this movie, and that will come up throughout this review. So the movie just keeps going with the boys walking as 49 of them are gunned down with the major riding ahead of them, played by Mark Hamill, just barking nonsense about the toughness this all takes and the honor they all have. Sound repetitive? Don't worry, there's a bit of variety. Some of them die because they just collapse from exhaustion, but some have broken ankles, and some get shot making a run for it. Others die because they take too long to dump their pants. Some die writhing on the ground, others die with dignity, and still more try their best to take one of the fascist soldiers down with them when they go. Now, in general, I think you can make a good movie out of just about any concept. And I still think that's true here with an incredibly simple plot. It just means you have to really build up the other two pillars of storytelling, plot and world building, and drive home your theme successfully. So what does The Long Walk do? Well, of the 50 boys in the contest, we get to focus on Ray Garrity as our protagonist. When Ray starts the long walk, he makes some friends early on. Pete McVries, played by David Johnson, who for the second time in just over 365 days is the bright spot of a disappointing film, Hank Olson, and Art Baker. But Ray and Pete are the two main cats. In other words, right off the bat, we know one of these two is going to win, or at the very least, we know at least one of them will be in the final two. So now that the film has pretty much erased the tension in that regard, how does it make up for it? It really doesn't. There is no tension in this film aside from a coin toss of which focal character is going to win the stupid contest. So because the plot is embarrassingly simple and the stakes are just a step above ground level, we're going to get to know these characters really well, right? So that when it inevitably comes down to Ray and Pete, we're going to have a brutally hard time deciding whose wish we want to see granted. Well, not really. Yeah, we learn a bit about the characters, but even what we do learn would be a whole lot more compelling with some decent world building, which I will get to, believe me. We just get snippets from most guys. This guy's religious, this guy's a wisecracker, this guy's an antagonistic jerk who, honestly, is probably the most realistic portrayal of what a lot of guys who sign up to win this competition would be like. As for Pete, well, he's an incredibly optimistic guy. Despite his parents having died in the big war, yes, that's what it's called, being abused by his uncle, and making his way from family to family trying to find a home for his entire childhood. He wants to use his wish to do something to help as many people as possible. He talks passionately about hope, how it's not easy, and rather it takes effort and courage to have hope, in what really is a good bit of the movie. And Garrity, well, his whole character development comes from his dad. His dad was basically a thought criminal, and he would share aspects of the old ways with Ray, from music to philosophers ranging from Nietzsche to Albert Camus. By the way, the fact that Ray's dad chose to risk his life to read his son Albert Camus in this dystopian future is hilarious. Stephen King is such a dour, myopic nihilist that for him, thought crime in a hopeless dystopia would be absurdism. Not John Locke or Immanuel Kant or Plato or even Shakespeare. No, for King, the way to thought crime against nihilism is absurdism. Trading in everything is pointless and hopeless, so just give up and be depressed, for everything is pointless and hopeless, so just go crazy. Anyway, Ray's dad ends up getting dragged out of his home and executed for his thought crime by none other than the major who's leading the long walk.
No way!
So Ray wants to win the long walk so he can use his wish to ask for a gun and execute the major on the spot. And that's about it for character development. It's really minimal. And because of the nature of the plot of this story, it's all done by just exposition. Back when Rebel Moon came out, I ripped Zack Snyder for having his characters just sit around a table and each give a monologue about their backstory with zero writing skill to be seen. And that's how it's done here, albeit in a less extreme way. The conversation flows kind of well at times. But if you're gonna criticize Zack Snyder, whose writing is pretty much always deserving of the harshest criticism, then you have to criticize it here. Yes, the writers, be it Stephen King or J.T. Mullner, backed their story into a corner for it, but they did that to themselves. And so let's get to what should be the saving grace of this story, the world building. How did America get to be so bad? How bad is it really? These are the most basic questions that a story set in a dystopian future should be able to answer, and really should spend the bulk of its time answering. Is this a warning to us in the present of what might be coming? Is it another allegory of the struggle between classes? Something that's been done a number of times, but at least it's something. No, it's nothing. This story has no world building. Pretty much all of the world building given in this film has already been covered by me in this review. Luke Skywalker takes you out of your house and shoots you if you read Albert Camus, and the United States was devastated by some war. Was it a civil war? I don't know. We don't even get that. It's a world where young men sign up to walk either until they get shot for stopping or they see 49 other guys get shot, but I have no idea why they do it. Is it just because they're poor? I'm imagining the Great Depression as the poorest time in American history, and while neither of my grandparents are alive anymore, I am 100% positive neither would have signed up for this to get them and their families out of it. But we're told in the movie that every boy signs up for it every year. It's so compelling to everyone that Ray points out it's basically not even a choice, which is ridiculous because it literally is a choice. In fact, it's a choice his mother begs him not to make. And the best part? The movie isn't even consistent with this. Every boy signs up for the long walk, but when Olsen dies and someone says that he had a wife, all the remaining boys don't even believe him initially because in their words, no one would sign up for it if they had a wife. How does that work, movie? Things are so bad that every boy in America wants to walk to their death on the roughly 2% chance that they get a fortune, but also if you have someone in your life you care about back home, whom, by the way, that fortune would set up for life, you would be insane to do it?
That doesn't make any sense!
In the Hunger Games, most kids don't want to compete in the games because they're more than likely going to end up dead. And the ones that do want to do it for the glory in it, not the money. That makes sense, especially as the world gets built up more and more and the games go on and the careers' rose-colored glasses about the games get taken off. And I'm not like a huge fan of the Hunger Games, but compared to The Long Walk, it's a masterpiece. So okay, maybe the story drives home some themes. Or maybe there's a super exciting twist. Well, again, here's what you would expect in this kind of movie. People start making friends and helping them along the way, but as the field narrows down, their own victory becomes more and more possible, and they start losing any care or sympathy for the men they had walked with. They start to turn on each other, tripping and playing dirty, trying to get the other ones killed. Like, again, what has to happen in the Hunger Games with alliances and is done better in Catching Fire. Susan Collins is not a phenom. This is a very basic exploration of human nature returning to our primitive instincts. But that doesn't happen. Alliances literally last until the very end. Which, okay. But how about any good twists? Well, there is this character named Stebbins, who seems to be basically the equivalent to the careers in the Hunger Games. He's a specimen. Everyone notices it as soon as they show up. Like he's been training his whole life for this walk. But he ends up getting sick and even still powers through to the final 3 with Ray and Pete. He then, after being a complete unknown quality for basically the entire walk, not opening up to anyone about anything, finally tells Ray and Pete something real. Now, this isn't an exact quote, but it's pretty close. You know the mechanical rabbit they use in greyhound races to give the dogs something to chase? Well, I'm the rabbit. And as soon as he said that, I actually perked up, because what it sounds like is he's a ringer. It sounds like what he's saying is he was planted there by the government so that no normal citizen would win the prize, and they could control the wish they have to grant. But he's gotten sick and can't finish, and the soldiers can't just shoot the other two because it's all being televised live. And my brain immediately started churning. What does this mean? Ray was right to want to kill the Major. What about Pete the Optimist? Maybe now he'll end up winning, but have such a deeper hatred for the Long Walk thanks to this revelation that he'll use his wish to carry out Ray's plan. Or he'll let himself get killed so Ray can carry it out. But it turns out, Stebbins just said that. It didn't actually mean that he's some sort of Rainer. It actually just meant that apparently he thought he was a machine, but he's not. Cool, I guess. And the actual twist is that Stebbins is actually the Major's bastard son and wants to use the wish to be invited to dinner at his father's house, which is wild. You're telling me that out of all of the boys in the entire country who all supposedly signed up for the Long Walk, they not only picked one whose father the Major had killed for thought crimes, but they also picked the same Major's bastard son? No, that didn't happen. The odds of that are so astronomically high, it's laughable. Like, how would that happen? Ray and Stebbins are from different states. And I believe it's implied at one point that Stebbins isn't even from the same region because he makes fun of the boring terrain they're walking through. So does this fascist government just have one enforcer that they send all over the entire United States to execute people for thought crimes and also lead their flagship propaganda program? And he's knocking up every chick he comes across like he's Genghis Khan? There's no way! Let's just talk about the horrible ending and get out of here. I honestly thought this review would be 4 minutes max with how little plot is in the movie, but it turns out this movie is just that bad. It comes down to Ray and Pete. And first, Pete stops walking to let Ray win, but when Ray realizes it, he goes back and pulls Pete forward and eventually slips behind him, sacrificing himself for Pete. It's kind of a nice moment. Ray chooses hope and lets Pete use his wish to make a difference. But because this is a Stephen King story and he sticks landings with all the grace and skill of J.J. Abrams, Pete ends up just using his wish to get a gun and shoot the Major. Then he turns around and keeps walking. Because of course he does. Stephen King is a nihilist. So this is a nihilist ending to a nihilist story that was a complete waste of time and honestly started making me question maybe nihilism is the way. Or maybe we'll have more luck with the next dystopian future story. At the very least, the legs will move a little faster.